when I developed this theory, that was 2001, the first electronic publishing, and I decided to publish in peer-reviewed journals, I found that it is very difficult to publish issue that contradicts to some adopted postulates in the mainstream science. So I began publishing in my shortened name. My real name is Stoyan Sarg. I'm Bulgarian-born Canadian. And, but when I started publish about this theory and related output results, I published under the name Stoyan Sarg. And in that time, in 2002, I tried to publish first in the physical archive that is moderated by, I think, by Coulomb University. And just after the first publication passed, trying to publish the second one, a ban on my name was put there that is still enforced. So, but I found other way to publishing. But interesting things is just I could publish easier under my real name, Stoyan Sarg, but more difficult under this shortened name. And I have published articles. Usually, I think the people think that I am two persons, and but it is otherwise it is a good thing because I am still working at university environment. So my focus, what was the purpose of this unified theory? The purpose was to find the physical model in the very bottom level of the microscopic range that could be could make more complicated models by pure geometrical configurations, and in this way to build models that could work starting from the elementary particles, quantum mechanics, explaining also the features of the physical vacuum, explaining why the velocity of light is so accurate, then quantum mechanical interactions between the elementary particles, the structure of the elementary particles, the structure of the physical vacuum, that we call it, is like known as an ether. Then atoms, molecules, chemical compositions, more complex compositions like a biomolecule that I found they have option to storage energy. Also, to explain the effects of special and general relativity, inertia of the mass, and some cosmological events even behind the Big Bang, interpreted differently, however, than in the mainstream science. And then to close this range and to explain how the microcosmos is related to the universe. So to focus now about one of the outcome of the theory, it is the cold fusion. We know the enormous progress in cold fusion demonstrated last year in Italy, that in fact is a result of 15 years research and pioneered by Piantelli, Focardi, and Rossi, and they demonstrated in September last year output power about half of megawatt. Why the mainstream science is silent about this? Because there is no explanation about the possibility of cold fusion. But the problem is deeper. The problem is the concept of the physical vacuum. That is wrong. And from this wrong concept, starting to build like a foundation of the building in the contemporary physics, we don't get full reality. We just develop complicated mathematical models, but they don't show everything. One of these models is quantum mechanical models of atoms. It is based on Bohr atomic planetary model. This model has problems from beginning of his establishment that they are not solved. And this model, because it is so wide accepted, everybody, when he gets about the atoms, he imagined these models. But there is not, this model is just a mathematical. It is not a real physical model. It is known that Maxwell built his famous treatise on electricity and magnetism on the assumption of the existence of material ether. In 1920, when Einstein developed general relativity, he realized that he needs ether in order to explain the space curvature. So in his book, he writes that without ether, the general relativity theory is unthinkable. But in the same time, he rejects the assumption of material ether favored by Maxwell. Why? Because in this case, the equation E equal mc square could not work because the ether could not be annihilated. This has a big repercussion in our vision of the universe, of the cosmology, of the Big Bang. The Big Bang, even from this assumption, the Big Bang appeared is not valid because in this case there is not a pure energy separated by the matter. And even the Einstein equation E equal to mc square, m is not equal to matter. That is accepted now in the mainstream science, but it is when you start from the ether concept and from the model that I developed, I see that this mass depends on the state of the physical vacuum. In some cases, it could be changed. So, shortly, the framework of the basic structure of matter. In the very bottom level, that I associate with the Planck scale, that is extremely in the microcosmos, we need just two particles that are spherical, but with a ratio of 2 to 3 in their diameter, and one universal law I call supergravitation, because it is distinguished by the Newtonian law that the forces are inverse proportional to the cube of distance. This means that in very close distances in microcosmos, the forces are extremely large. And by these particles, by pure geometrical configurations, I don't show here because I show in other talks, but here I don't have time for this. By this configuration, I built three-dimensional structures like fractal structures. And at some point, these fractal structures becomes like a prism, extended objects with internal twisted structures. And this, they preserve that they are just only two. One is right side twisting, another is left side twisting. And this I may call sub-elementary particles. In fact, appear that they could build a cosmic structure I call cosmic lattice. that has all the property of the physical vacuum, including propagation of velocity of light with a known velocity, and also propagation of Newtonian gravity. But Newtonian gravity, that is inverse proportional to the square distance, becomes different than the supergravity because it is propagated by this structure. And this structure, in fact, it has like a diamond arrangement. Here is the individual, I call this structure cosmic lattice. Individual nodes, this is from the 4 prism, 1, 2, 3, 4. But they are held by these supergravitational forces, so they are flexible. When investigated their dynamics, they have two axes of symmetry. One axis along this prism, I call, and other axis, x, y, z, that's orthogonal. And if you arrange this cosmic lattice nodes together, in fact, you see how the propagations of two kinds of forces. One kind of forces is supergravitational forces propagated by this axis. Other forces are electromagnetic propagated by this axis. And why? When investigating the oscillations along two axes, it is simply just deviating from the central point. We see along the orthogonal axis, it is in this. Along on this axis, it is this. We have 2 dips here, 1 dip. So as a result of this, it makes a complex oscillations I call spatial precession momentum that when starting from this point, make this curve, go to the point B, that is not consigned with A. But after many oscillations, it closes something like I call quasi-sphere with 6 bumps and 6 dimples. And this quasi-sphere then become, when they are arranged in the cosmic lattice, it defines the magnetic line. But when it is elongated, it appears when there is electrical field, it becomes elongated. It becomes a portion of electrical lines. This supplementary particles that I call twisted prisms is elongated. In the initial phase of the galaxy development, they combined in more complex structure I call helical structures. You see here from the 2 particles. And there with ratio 2 to 3, so they enter each other. I call first order, this is the second order, could be also third order. And this structure appears to be the structure of the electron. It is the smallest stable particle, but with the rich oscillations. And you see here these structures that is outside, and here there is another structures inside. They oscillate. There is also one central structures. And by their oscillations, it has very specific features. The proper frequency of the oscillations of this structure to this, in fact, appears to be equal to the Compton frequency. At the same time, the cosmic lattice node, one of his frequency is also equal to the Compton frequency. And what happens? Also, it has also some internal structure by the same prism, but more dense. So the internal structure here defines electrical lines. So when there is electrical field and this structure is moving, it is rotating like a screw. And it has all known features of the electron. And they're quantum mechanical features. Also, by these structures, I was able to derive the parameters of the cosmic lattice. I call cosmic lattice that, in fact, correspond to the ether. And I found that I derived the equations of the mass equations. And this is this. The mass of the particle is equal to the pressure of the cosmic lattice over the volume of this particle divided by the c square. The volume is impenetrable to the cosmic lattice because it has a denser internal lattice. So, in fact, it defines. Okay. Why the periodic table is so strange? The answer is that it should have some 3D shapes of the structure. So this is the structure of the proton I found. This is the structure of the neutron. It is the same toroid, but it is twisted. Here it is double-folded. This is internal structure. So here the atoms, protons, hydrogen atoms. This is electronic orbit, deuterium, helium. And in more complex atoms, so we distinguish because this is the most dense structure, it stays in the middle. So in more complex atoms, it becomes like this. And here is interesting, the explanation, all the features of the periodic table. For example, I took the feature of the lithium. And you have here the helium nuclei, here one deuteron, and this free end defines the valence. So here in beryllium we have two valences. In boron, 1, 2, 3. In carbon, 1, 2, 3, 4. But in the nitrogen, because this becomes closer from the both poles, they're connected with the quantum orbits, they're excluded from valence. So we have 3 valences, 2 valences, 1 valence, and here the supergravitational forces close, pretty close these protons, and it becomes noble gas. Here another example of other elements I made for all elements for the periodic table, stable elements. Here one mock-up that I make for the argon structure, that show how they arrange. So these are fractal structures. You could say you could not have a freedom to put in different ways. They just take their place that correspond to the more dense structure. Here example of electron microscope of the golden surface, and this is by these structures. Here is the H2 molecule. From this molecule, I calculated one important parameter of supergravitational, and this is this parameter. And using this parameter, I calculated the binding energy between the neutron and proton in deuterium by a simple method, and I get pretty close value. Here is another proof that the arrangement of the proton and neutrons. In fact, neutrons are arranged over the proton, and they oscillate. In fact, this oscillation is found in this. And from this graph, you can see that there is another interesting effect. There is a general relativistic effect in microscale. And this general relativistic effect, in fact, causes the mass outside of this field to be detected smaller. And this, in fact, explains the binding energy. And here example of proximity field, Coulomb field of the proton and neutron. Here's a consideration for modification of Coulomb barrier leading to the reactions. Here, explanation by this model of some reactions. Here, explanation of these reactions in palladium plus deuteron, making a silver. And here you see the Coulomb field make more complicated shape, but it is not circular. This is the explanation of the Piantelian-Focardi-Rossi method. Another method here. Here is another explanation of the, in fact, the beauty of this is just from the structure of the nuclei, you could conceive another possibility. For example, here is the experimentally proved with nickel that goes to copper or zinc. You see here the similarity of the nickel with this chrome. So I make prediction that the chrome also could be involved in the cold fusion reaction. The difference only, we have 2 radial pairs, we have 4 radial pairs. And the prediction of my prediction is that these reactions are possible according to this structure. So these are conclusions that quantum mechanical model could not serve for understanding the cold fusion reaction. And another thing is that cold fusion reaction is not only feasible, it is a good replacement for the unsafe currently used nuclear energy. And here the result of currently used nuclear energy, we have so much accumulated hazardous radioactive waste that there is not any way to be rid of it. Only the time, but the time is thousands of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now let's have some questions for Dr. Sarg.
Thank you for an interesting report. As far as I understand, your model actually is a model of superstring, helical structure, right?
No, it doesn't. There is not any association with superstring theory, because superstring theory, they don't have a thickness, they don't have a material thickness. While these structures, they have material structure that's indestructible.
There are some works which consider analogous to your theory, that it's helical structure, like toroidal helical structure. And my question is, how from your theory comes electrical charge? Can you explain formation of electrical charge?
Yeah, maybe I go very fast about this. In fact, the electrical charge, according to this theory, appears features of the physical vacuum. But in this physical vacuum has to be a particle. So the particle creates oscillations. I show here, for example, the oscillations of this elementary knot. And if it is elongated in this way, then the electrical if you arrange many of these in line, they make electrical line. And then the electron, internal structures that is very dense, make such kind of arrangement and of the oscillation as the cosmic lattice. So in fact, the electron structure creates electrical charge. And it is a static charge.
Okay, and can you calculate, according to this model, that is exactly -1 charge?
The charge sign depends on the twisting of the elementary building bond. That's a prisms.
Mm-hmm.
If they are, for example, left side twisting, they create negative charge. If they are right side twisting, they create positive charge. But I don't, I just explain the physical behind the charge, not calculation of the value.
Yeah, I understand. Another question, are you familiar with work of Stephen Phillips from England? His book is ESP of Quarks and Superstrings, where he, he confirmed scientifically that what Leadbeater and Besant observed with their psi vision is real, and that was much more complicated superstrings, but it is even much more complicated than helical structure.
Yeah. The theory of the helical structure doesn't use multidimensional space. String theory without multidimensional space is impossible. Everything here is spent in three-dimensional space and unidirectional time. And this structure, because I envision they are real, but they are much, much below the most powerful microscopes. But they have all features explaining even the quarks, but the quarks, according to you, they are not real particles. Even the mainstream, there is questions, they are real particles. They say quarks, they measure some kind of forces from the showers and from the energy and Einstein equation. They say, oh, this corresponds to quark. But in the particle experiment, for example, this is the structure of the internal structure of the proton and neutron. And you have here one negative pion, one positive pion, and this is the count. When they crush these structures, multiple possible, they call resonances appears, and they assign every resonance to some structure, some particle. That, in fact, is appears not.
Dr. Sarg, thank you very much.